Ah. Hey, Olivia, you know what it's saying? It's saying you need the latest version of Instagram. So why don't we get off? It'll probably take you like 30 seconds to just update your Instagram, and then we'll get back on. Does that make sense? Hey, Olivia, if you can see me, basically it's saying you need to upgrade to the latest version of Instagram. And so I think what I'll do is like I'll just end this and then let you upgrade it. I think just in your app store, or to update your the Instagram app. Is that cool? Fucking technology, I swear to God. I had a crazy problem this morning. Okay, cool. All right, so let me see. All right, tell me now.
Okay, finally.
Yo, I swear to God, I am so fucked with Alex. We're both so fucked. I was like, oh, she's gonna kill me because she asked me this specific thing, and I like went through it with Ava, and now she's like, dude, I can't get on this. And I'm like, oh my God.
Meanwhile, I see I have like 82 updates to do. So, sorry.
Right. Thank God Instagram told me that, because honestly, I was apoplectic and I was so fucked this morning. We had our Bears for Adventures virtual conference, and I was supposed to, I'm one of the 3 original founders. I was supposed to like be part of the introduction. I fucking couldn't get on. And I was like,
we're old, David.
I don't even want to go through it. When this was happening, I was like, oh my God, fuck my life.
This is my first IG live, so.
No, but it's cool. You see, the cool thing about it, and I should back up, say, hey, I'm David. I'm the host of The Extra.
Introduce ourselves, you mean?
Doctor. But when you and I have, friends for a long time and played tennis for a long time, but when we discussed doing this, we decided to do the first session on Zoom and record it, and it's sort of a brainstorming session, just to sort of see how you felt about it, what we came up with. But the cool thing about this is that there's just a real immediacy to it, And
I think we came up with a lot of different topics, right?
Oh, yeah, we came up with a ton of different topics, and then we sort of said, how would we break this up into sort of different vignettes or different, because we were so all over the place, not only around therapy and relationship and marriage and trauma, but, lots of things. You and I know each other originally from the tennis court, and we're huge dog people, and it sort of all ties in.
Yeah, I know. So I think this is a wonderful thing, and I loved, maybe bringing in other people. But even what you did, just asking questions, like what would you ask a marriage and family therapist?
Right.
Start, and to kind of build on that. And maybe that will just kind of open up conversations to talk about relationships and families. And
Yeah, let's start. Yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, we did get some questions, and they dealt with relationships in the pandemic. And if I just throw that out there as a topic, because you've been in the thick of it with your clients, what comes to mind? What do you want to talk about there?
Pandemic and relationships. Well, I think I think it worked both ways. I think for a lot of couples, it did a lot of good. And I think for a lot of couples, it didn't do so good, so I think there's both. I think there are a lot of stressors. And I see in my practice, I was super busy last year, but I think this year even more so. And I think now it's really starting where people are just like, you know, um, yeah, it's kind of blowing up in all areas. It's just a lot of stressors and, life getting back to normal. But people have been at home, homeschooling and working from home and not going out. And so I think there's a lot of different things. But I know people who really like this time. And
Yeah, let's start. It's like let's start with the good, because you said you've had some clients who it's been sort of a boon for. It's been, I don't know.
I think it was a time for couples to nest. I think a lot of couples, especially in the beginning, took the time to um, do projects around the home and just kind of nesting, like being together in one place with their children if they have children. Um, and so I think it was a good amount of togetherness, spending more time together and kind of just having some downtime. There were, less social activities on the weekends and people were just
Right.
taking it slower. And I think that was good for many people.
Were there certain factors though that stood out there? Like, I guess I would say those couples who have done really well through this, were they doing well before, and do they have children? Like, how do those two factors play in?
I don't know, not necessarily, I would say. But I think couples that were probably not doing so well, I think it was harder on them
Mm-hmm.
go through this, especially if they had children and were homeschooling. A lot of people didn't have the means to have nannies and they had to stay home. One person had to quit their job and
Yeah,
the children. And I think there's a lot of different things. I don't think you can just box it into,
totally.
a lot of different variables that.
Well, resources become a huge issue, right? I mean, the pandemic really highlighted. I don't want to be so cliched as to say the haves and have-nots. It's more nuanced than that. But resources, if you do have the ability to afford help, right, and things like that, I'm sure it made a difference.
The problem with that is, and I think another big part was the anxiety around COVID. And that differed greatly among families. And
Hmm.
not families, but among couples, because one person may have felt like they wanted to go out more and they weren't as fearful, and the other was, or there were health issues. One person was more at risk, or you had an elderly family member that lived with you. So all of those things, played a huge part in how people were dealing with it. But I think the anxiety around COVID was a huge factor in how well or not well people did, because people who were very afraid, they didn't leave their house at all. And
Hmm.
their children, because they kept their children home and they didn't let their children go out and play, and so it affects the whole family.
Right. What about
Help, most people let their help go because they didn't want people in the house, so they didn't have any, they didn't, if they had a nanny, if they had a cleaning lady, many people, did not let those people in the home. So they had all of that on top of everything else to deal with.
yeah? I mean, I saw something up close with my own family, which was, my I'm going to speak about my parents. They, have been married 50, coming up on 51 years. And for the 51 years, they've basically are accustomed to, basically my father being out of the house at work, probably, 40 to 60 hours a week. And so their whole routine was predicated on that. And then all of a sudden, kind of overnight, that switched. And it was very challenging, I think, for them.
Well, I think that's another thing that happened. People maybe who, traveled a lot or had jobs that required them to travel, and then suddenly they were at home, and couples had to face each other. They had to, be on top of each other. And it just, for some, it didn't work out well. And we kind of thought, are couples gonna have a lot of babies during this pandemic, or they're
Right.
gonna be a lot of divorces? I don't think, based on statistics too, that there was a rise in pregnancies, or that couples were having a lot of sex during this time.
Is
Because
that, yeah,
I think that kind of plays into, a lot of togetherness. It can also create a lack of, mystery and passion and desire for sex.
mm. So how did you like, I know we're talking in sort of generalizations, and obviously you can't speak specifically about any clients, but is there a general baseline of advice during the lockdown, if things weren't going well, what could help people out?
If things weren't going well, I want to understand what's not going well.
Mm-hmm.
What are the troubles that couples are running into? But I do think it's important to kind of create a routine, and I think that was in the beginning difficult to establish for people, was kind of have a routine where you do your work at a certain place at a certain time, and you maybe have lunch at that time. You go for a walk, or just create some kind of a schedule that keeps you going, or keeps you incentivized. And also, like, kind of finding some hobbies to do. I think a lot of people pick up things like gardening, or walking. I hear that a lot, that couples started walking together, and they still continue to do that. And just to have some time together, but then also to create some separateness and to have some time apart, to do your own thing.
Right. I know in your practice, you'd have to explain this, but as a family, relationship, marriage, trauma counselor, you see couples, but you will also see them individually, right? Whereas some other therapists, that sort of goes back to sort of theory, right? So how does that help you? What's the, why that?
Yeah, I'll answer the question. So I have a lot of couples who already come in having their individual therapist, and that's fine and good. And I don't get involved, or I don't say anything. But what I do say is kind of that in the beginning, when they come to me first, that I also see couples individually, and I just make it very clear to them that that if something comes up that is maybe more individual work, or oftentimes couples request to have an individual session, that I grant that, I do that. And I don't share from those sessions in the couple session. And I make that very clear too. And I think the idea behind the theory, at least, is, there's one therapist for one family. And otherwise you have a lot of different relationships going on with the family and the therapists, and it can be conflicting. And I think the price is the client who pays it ultimately, and so that's kind of the idea. But it's really.
And you don't share, meaning what? Whereas other therapists will say, no, anything that comes into me from you individually, I will, or I may.
Yeah, they don't want to keep secrets, or they don't want to, they don't want you to tell them something that they can't share. And I work differently than that, because to me, sometimes, let's say somebody is having, an outside relationship, and sometimes they come to therapy, but they don't disclose that in the couple session. But you maybe have a suspicion they're not quite into therapy, or they're not as motivated, and you do an individual session and you talk about that, and maybe they'll disclose, and most often they do, and they'll disclose that, and you'll have a conversation about that. But it's not my responsibility as a therapist to then disclose that in the couple session. I think that would be a disservice to the couple. And also, but it could be something where as a therapist, you can work with that person to kind of figure out, what are they getting from that relationship, and what do they want to do there, and what is it going to take for them to either make a decision if they want to work on their marriage or not. But so I will work individually with somebody like that. and maybe couples therapy has to be put on hold for a while,
Yeah.
until, but that's kind of the idea, because
Yeah.
but most of the time I work with the couple together in the room, because it takes two to tango, and I love to see, and there are a lot of therapists who work individually with couples because they don't like to have the couple in the room. It just gets you know too crazy. I love it. I love to see that dance between people. So typically I always want to work with the couple together.
Right. And you brought up, sex and procreation earlier. So I imagine that sex lack or lack thereof is a huge issue um, amongst couples that you see, or maybe I'm assuming something that's incorrect, but I just feel like in talking to so many married couples, or when either the guy or the woman separately will say, like, and I'm talking about even in what I consider to be really good, I'm going to call it partnerships, where they're like, there's a huge amount of respect, there's a huge amount of like admiration and love, and they're great parents raising their kids, like they're like, yeah, we don't have sex anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think sex is an interesting thing, and I often feel like it's couples don't always, very few times do they want the same thing at the same time, and I think it's rare for, at least in my experience, I've had it happen where a couple comes in specifically about sexual issues,
Mm-hmm.
but I make a point, I find it important to ask at some point about their sex life and if that is something that they want to talk about. Oftentimes I do hear that they're not having sex, or it's they live more like roommates, and it's dead in the bedroom. So it does come up at some point if it's important, because I think it is important for most couples to eventually address.
And have you seen couples make real progress? Like if there's like, yeah, our sex life isn't good, and that's important to us. Have you seen couples make progress there?
It necessarily maybe becomes a focus in therapy, but as they work on the relationship and things improve in other areas,
Hmm.
life then improves, and I think unless it's something specific that they're coming in with or struggling in the bedroom about preferences, or amount of sex, or how they have sex, or that kind of stuff, um, generally it kind of ends up just being you know um, something that gets better as the relationship improves.
Right. It's more manifestation of more like primary or primal issues in a sense.
Right, but I mean there's also um, couples who struggle. There can be biological things or sexual dysfunctions. Then it becomes more about that, and then you have to talk about it, and that may be more for a sex therapist. I don't, I'm not trained specifically in sex therapy, so if it would be something like so specific to that, I may refer them out.
Mhm. Hey, since part of this is like, you and I discussed in this Zoom session, which we'll post. I think, like, I think you'll be cool with us posting that, or take a look at it. And oh, you know what? I don't hear you now.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, maybe you didn't say anything. Maybe just nodded your head, and I thought you were speaking. But one of the things we talked about was like just that we would kind of make this into a series, and we'll figure out how often we'll shoot, whether it'll be once every couple of weeks or once a month, or something like that. And we have all sorts of different little vignettes, including like the question series, which has been awesome that a few people ask questions, because I just launched the Extraordinary. This is the first time you've done Instagram Live. Like, it's very new for us, so I think we can really build something. But take me back to what drove you to this work.
To family therapy, to therapy in
Yeah.
general.
As a career, and more than a career, because it's sort of like a vocation in a sense. It's sort of a calling, I think, to do this type of work.
I never really thought about it until, I mean, I really didn't know about family therapy until my stepmom became a family therapist. And even then, I didn't really understand what it was about. But I think when I was, I think the changing point for me was when my mom died. And that was kind of like, I was searching for something, and I think that was more my calling, going back to school. And I wasn't really happy in what I was doing in real estate. It wasn't a fit for me.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of drove me back to going to school, and I just became so interested in what I was learning and learning more about myself and really understanding my family and what, you know, what what happened, with my mother and all of that and me in it. And so that really was the launching point.
Mm. How old were you when your mom passed?
I was 24.
Mhm. Yeah, right. So you're just like, I remember because I think we probably met around then, started playing some tennis and stuff.
Yeah,
Probably, right? Yeah, Lucky was, I don't know, like a baby. Yeah. Um, you know what? See,
really.
now, yeah, now you're kind of going in and out, but I hear you again. You're good.
Okay. You hear me now?
Yeah, I don't know. It's fucking technology. The technology is insane. It's like the most amazing thing, but also the most frustrating. But
Like a stand or a holder for my phone here. Yeah, so that's really what, and I love it. I love the work I do. I love just because it's about, it's about life and it's about relationships and nobody escapes it. And, so to me, I'm just so interested in that and just curious.
yeah, one of the things I was thinking, and I mentioned to you, I thought would be cool to talk about was like, I've been in and out of therapy since really since my mid 20s, and I think it's very, very valuable work. And I also realized that you have to really turn up for it. You have to show up. You have to be willing to like put in the work. How does that manifest in your practice with clients?
I mean, it does or it doesn't. I think everybody is different, and I think you have to meet people where they're at, and that's really how I look at it. And some people, I think generally, coming to therapy is just a relief in of itself, and just walking through the door and having somebody listen. And I think we underestimate the power of listening. And
Mm,
just people don't listen. And if I listen to my clients, they, in their families, their friends, they don't feel listened, they don't feel heard, or
they don't feel seen. They don't feel.
yeah. And I think so that alone, and just being able to stabilize somebody's anxiety, just, I mean, that the therapist plays that role too, right? It just, the therapist absorbs some of the anxiety a couple brings in, or any individual. So that can be somewhat of a relief. And I think, the goal for me as a therapist is to initially just reduce somebody's anxiety so they can be less reactive and more thoughtful about their life and increase their functioning therefore. And I think everybody takes the work. People often stop therapy when they feel like they're functioning a little bit better, but they don't, they haven't really changed, or the work is, it's a lifelong process. And I think once you study it and you do it, you realize that, and it really is humbling, but it's never ending. And
Well,
so
assuming you have a fair number of clients that feel like, okay, I got what I can out of this, or I'm in a better place, I'm going to stop and then inevitably come back, or often come back, or.
off. I mean, I have had clients for years and years, and that's what I love. And I have an open door policy. For me, it's, you come when you need it. And so I think that's, you develop a wonderful relationship with clients over many, many years.
Right.
And they, you come and then you're good. And when something comes up again, you want to process it.
Right.
And
Is that an unfair critique of therapy? I mean, I've heard this critique a lot, that it's like a not a self-perpetuating, but it's a perpetuating cycle of infinity. Meaning, when am I supposed to be better enough, good enough to not do this? Wouldn't the goal be?
but you're thinking about, you're like in.
I'm not saying I'm just saying this is the critique I've heard. I'm not saying that's actually not my opinion.
No, but I think generally speaking, people want to have solutions, right? And I think that is part of Western thinking too. We want answers. We want to be fixed. We want, I mean, it's the whole like, you know, I mean, look at just all the self-help books and all the blogs and the this and, you know, it's about, we want to be happy. We want to be, you know, so people come in with that thinking that maybe therapy is you know, you're gonna get some guidelines or some, you know, a solution to this is what I need to do to solve my problem. And I don't know if it works quite like that. You know, yes, you find solutions and you work towards solutions, but it's not like it's not so black and white. And I think
Yeah, of course you want.
very much in the gray zone, and there's, you know, it's not so just.
Yeah. How I asked you this on the Zoom call, but since this is new, and how much is your practice guided, or how much do you reflect upon your own marriage, your own role as a mother, and all your other roles to guide your practice?
I mean, I think as a young therapist, I'm very much in it myself, you know, and I relate to a lot of my couples and clients.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of it is like, I think maybe earlier when I started, I felt that more as a challenge for me, you know, when I was a beginning therapist to kind of, you know, I'm in the middle of this. I haven't figured out anything myself, and I'm still, you know, I mean, you're in it. But I think because I do this every day, and I study this, and I go to therapy myself, and I read, that maybe that, you know, gives me some more knowledge or expertise than maybe other people. But I live the same stuff that every couple does, and I say that to my clients often to just normalize, you know, that, hey,
That you're not on some like deified pedestal of knowledge or something.
don't have a perfect marriage. I have the same problems that you know, many clients have coming in. So it's, you know, there's a saying, there's no every family is dysfunctional with more than one person in it, you know, and I believe that.
Yeah, no, totally. Ava just asked a question, which was, for those who feel like therapy is not for them, do you have a response to that?
I think therapy is not for everyone, you
Yeah, I would
know,
agree.
and I respect that. I don't think therapy is for everyone at all.
Right.
May, you know, choose yoga or meditation or whatever it is, or nothing at all, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so no, I would never say therapy is, you know.
How often in your the couples therapy is the dynamic one part of the couple sort of dragging the other one in, or one saying, I want to be here and I can't get my partner? Like, how often does that occur? And how do you handle it?
I think that happens fairly often, where maybe one person is more reluctant.
Mm-hmm.
And I think oftentimes I get the initial phone call from the person who is a little bit more reluctant, because but they're kind of at the point where, you know, either their partner is like, you know,
Like this, like we're fucking doing this, or I'm out.
and and the person then takes the initiative to call. But I think once they're in the door, and people who have not been to therapy at all, you know, are usually a little bit skeptical and fearful, but then they relax very quickly because they realize, hey, this is not so bad. This is a normal, you know, conversation. And I laugh with my clients a lot. I mean, there's a lot of laughter, and I'm a big believer in just humor and just, you know, using that. And I think that can really be enlightening
So
for.
it's like very, that there's a little levity to it, that it's not this like very heavy like therapy. Right. Right.
No, no. And you kind of match your client, you know, if you have a
Right.
client who comes in and curses, I'll curse too. You know?
Right.
It just, you want to join with people, and I think that is one of the most important parts of therapy, because therapy doesn't work unless you join with someone, and your clients have to feel connected to you, and otherwise it just doesn't work.
Right.
I think a big part is joining with your clients.
Yeah. And my therapists have said, I mean, particularly one is who I think is very, very qualified, said it to me in the past, like, hey, we're a team here. It's not like me against you, because oftentimes we're going in with all these issues that we're triangulating and defensive and trauma and all this stuff. But like, I think she would always often tell me like, hey, I'm an advocate for you, you know, too, in a sense.
Right. And, I have clients who sometimes leave, either being a little ticked off, and I think that's okay. And that stirs some thinking. And I don't think you leave therapy always feeling, necessarily better. I think sometimes it triggers things, and there's a reaction. And I think that's okay.
Have you had situations?
Oftentimes, like, the magic happens outside of the therapy room. It's not like people have these like aha moments, and this can be years later, or it can be something that they remember, or that comes up, or that takes a lot of thinking and doing until something clicks.
Yeah. Do you have situations where clients have crossed a line with you and you either stop working with them or set up a certain boundary around the interaction?
Yes, I think that's happened. I can't recall anything specific, but do you have a question about what do you mean crossing the line of?
No, I mean, I remember having a few sessions, not where I would, yeah, I was like, I would, you know, challenge. I mean, listen, I'm in therapy, but if I felt like that, if I thought that my therapist, I was like, hey, you have to step up here. Like I would basically like, I'm doing a lot of hard work. You've got to be better too, And like, it's a hard conversation. I mean, I guess what I would say is certainly for the therapists I've seen for longer periods of time, it's because I think they're really qualified. But if I felt like, hey, you're not stepping up here, I would let them know. And that can be a hard conversation.
But I would try to unpack that, and discuss it, and then say, if it's not working for them, then what do they think they need to do about it? And maybe that means not come back, or, I don't know, but I would certainly talk about it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of growth can come out of that too. It's not, like sometimes you get through those really hard times. Those hard times bring you closer together because you've been through them.
Right. Right. And sometimes it's the therapist working harder than the client, and so that's also something where I think, I mean, at least I have to check in with myself then and be like, okay, why am I hard here? And, maybe something's working with what the client, if they're not working harder, so, but yeah, no, and I mean, listen, it's happened with couples where I've had couples, one storms off in the middle of the session and, doesn't come back, and then they come back the next time. And so, stuff happens.
Yeah. What about, fuck, I had it'll come back to me. One of the things we've discussed is that Miami, sort of in its own way, being a small town, and a lot of your clients, I think, are referrals that you'll like, bump into clients, you'll see them out, how do you handle that?
I mean, I have a rule. I just tell clients in the beginning that it's a small town and I may run into them outside. And I generally just say, I won't acknowledge you in public unless you do, because I don't want to make people feel uncomfortable. Or, if in a restaurant, for example, and I'm saying hi to them and then they're that,
Right. And then you don't want them to think like, oh, it's so fucked up. I saw Olivia and she didn't even like I don't exist. They're like, what the fuck?
Well, they'll be, and some come up and give me a hug, and it's, I think most clients, I've never had somebody ignore me, and generally they seem, pleased to see me. But I do it happens, and I've been in yoga classes where, it's just
Yeah, no, right. Of course, that part of life. One of the things that's always occurred in my life is, and one of the reasons that I'm probably so drawn to this type of like conversational interview thing is that people have really, in my life, I felt have opened up to me. They'll tell me things that I'm like incredibly like almost amazed at, like, wow, that, you know, that they're telling me this, but it's happened so for so many years and so often that I've become accustomed to it. But I've also been told that I also have to bear in mind that energetically I'm taking on a lot. You know, there's a lot of like at times very heavy information coming at me. Um, Obviously, you as a professional doing this, that is part of the job duty. But I would think that you have to be aware of it and how you handle all of this, you know, sort of heavy energy.
I mean, for me, I wouldn't say I take so much of it home outside of my therapy, and I'll tell you why. But I mean, I think being a therapist is such a privilege
Mm, mm,
to um, hold space for people who are hurting and who want to heal. And I think that is really the essence of the work of it's all, you know, people are in pain, in some kind of pain, and
totally.
they, you
Totally.
know, and to hold space and to sit in that. And that is another challenge, to sit in someone's pain,
Mm,
especially
mm,
if you're dealing with a death, a loss, something that you just cannot be fixed anyways.
right.
And that is real mourning. And I think that is very difficult for people to witness and listen to. And I think a therapist, if the therapist can somehow hold that space and sit in that pain with the client, and you know, and also listen to their stories and their life and what clients trust
Yeah.
and what they share, I mean, is such a privilege for
Mm,
me.
yeah. That's really powerful. And yeah, those words really resonate with me, particularly around healing. I often say, because right now, in the longest running relationship I've had with a, you know, quasi therapist is actually with a person who calls himself an energy healer. And when I say that to people, they're like, oh, what the fuck is that, energy healer? But I said, think about it. What is therapy really at its core? It's healing. It's an attempt to help people heal. So I think we come up with this word therapy, but to me, at its really primal structural basis, it's about helping people heal. So to call oneself a healer, to me, feels very authentic.
And you know, and more I kind of like to view myself, and I think maybe eventually I'll end up calling myself more a consultant, like a relationship consultant versus a
Mm,
therapist. And but yeah, I'm not here to fix anything. And I think to answer what you asked in the beginning, I think I can separate. I think you know, this goes more into theory and what I study and looking at family systems, and every individual is up against something. Nobody escapes that, and everybody, you know, the family and where people come from, that is a whole system.
yes.
And I think as a therapist, if you know that, and you can, then you know you play such a small role in someone's life, because there is a process happening that you cannot is happening no matter what you do. And and that's for everybody. So that, you know, gives me a lot of peace of mind that I, you know, there's I have very little power when it comes to, you know.
And you were mentioning you were going to come back to why you don't take it home or how you are
That's what I
take it
mean,
home.
is exactly because of that. Because, you know, you can make a difference in somebody's life,
Hmm.
but you're not going to be this like massive changing, you know, factor. There's a lot of other stuff happening,
Right.
and there is a process happening no matter if you want like it or not. And so that, you know, is a good way to separate, like, you do your work but you don't take it home.
And do you feel like that sometimes impacts that sometimes the expectations of you are that you're going to be some sort of, some sort of panacea, some sort of cure-all? And obviously that's an impossible bar to set, but do you feel like sometimes that is the expectation?
I think sometimes clients, and that maybe goes, yeah, they want to come in and they want to be fixed and they want you to tell them what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And, I giving
You don't
advice.
don't do that, right? You don't. Yeah, that's not your.
I think that's very easy work to do, just giving advice, and I don't think that's necessarily good therapy. And so, and so, but that's like a whole other conversation. That
Well, listen, we're touching on as I knew would happen, and it's okay. We tried to set out a few subjects. It's jumping around, sort of very tangentially, but still jumping around. So it's okay. There was a question. I know we're running out of time, but there was a question that was posted about how would one deal in a relationship with a narcissist, and my thought was like, wow, that's a big question. So I don't, but what do you want to say about narcissism?
No, first of all, I don't like to. I don't pathologize, and that's not thinking as a systems thinker. So I like to unpack that. Obviously, I know what a narcissist is. I know the definition, but
Yep.
if something, then I want to understand what they mean. What do they mean
Right.
about
Right.
for them? And because the funny thing is, and this is, couples will come in often, and it's the man is a narcissist, and what do the men say about the women? The women are bipolar, and that just that is about.
Wow, really? That's what you hear? That's
And,
a narcissism, bipolar sort of dichotomy.
right, and so I don't stick to labels, but I certainly unpack them because I want to know how that plays out
Yeah.
in a relationship.
Yeah.
And or in a relationship with a narcissist, well, what is keeping you in that? What are you getting from that? What pulls you back? How do you respond to that? And so I will unpack it in that way.
Yeah. No, that's
Yeah. Term you hear a lot these days.
is what?
Narcissism and
Yeah.
bipolar and all these labels. People love labels, and but to me labels they're just a label. It doesn't help me understand anything about a relationship and how that works. And it's just a label function the same way you can say, I'm an alcoholic, or I have depression, or I have anxiety. Well, what's the function of that in a person's life? And kind of looking at more relationally than through a pathological lens.
And it also speaks to how powerful and the import of language, of our words, because it's this sort of linear thing, but then like you're saying, the words, what do they really mean? Like, how do you unpack that?
Yes, I always ask the meeting. Sometimes we just assume we know, but I like to ask what things mean to my clients.
Yeah.
So I have to go because
we did our time.
Yeah.
This was awesome.
This was great, and we will continue, and we're gonna figure out some vignettes, and
that's right. We're gonna have to come up with a name for the sort of the question asking, like throughout Dear Olivia, but that's based on like Dear Anne, like remember in the papers they used to say like Dear Anne or Dear whoever. So that was anyway. All right, cool, awesome seeing you.
Great seeing you. Thank you.
Let's get on the tennis court. Let's start. Let's do this.
Let's do it when it stops being so windy out.
I know it's crazy wind. You're right. All right, cool.
All right.
I'll talk to you. All right, great. Have a great